I am Terry Ikumi. Welcome to the Gavel. The House of Representatives has suspended plenary indefinitely, citing chamber renovation and party primaries, and of course the Salah break. Now, this notice was given by the clerk of the House just as plenary was expected to resume on Tuesday, the 26th of April. Well, I was at National Assembly to observe this renovation and other construction works ongoing in the complex. Plenary was held in the Senate on Wednesday after suspending Tuesday's plenary in line with the tradition of the National Assembly following the demise of a member of the House of Representatives, Nsekpeyong, in Akwa Ibom State. Now, the Senate has passed a bill for the amendment of the Terrorism Prevention Act 2013 to prevent the payment of ransom for kidnap cases. Take a listen. Nigerians, particularly those in the northern part of the country, have endured terrorist attacks for more than a decade, with massive casualties and utter destruction of properties. The National Assembly had passed a legislation to provide measures for the detection, prevention and prohibition of terrorism in the country. The Senate has now amended that legislation to also outlaw the collection of ransom by abductors for the release of victims. These funds, they say, is often channeled towards terrorist acts.
The proposed amendment, no doubt, will set standards and regulatory system intended to prevent terrorist groups from laundering money through the banking system and other financial networks.
Section 14 of the Act is amended to state that a person who arranges and participates in an activity connected with a terrorist group, collects or provides logistics or information connected with an act of terrorism, solicits or renders support for a terrorist group or an act of terrorism, commits an offense and is liable on conviction to imprisonment for a term of not less than 20 years.
This is one bill, one piece of legislation that can turn around not only the security situation in Nigeria, but even the economic fortunes of our country.
The Senate also mourned those killed by an explosion at the site of an illegal refinery in Abezi community, Ohaji Egbema local government area of Imo State on Friday, the 22nd of April, 2022.
Many may argue, as they have said, that it was a business of bunkering. But, Mr. President, life is involved. It's also a clarion call on the federal government of Nigeria to take a second look about artisan modular refinery.
Illegal refining, again, at the moment, is causing a lot of damage to our country. So it's a very dicey situation, but we have to utilize the ingenuity of our citizens, those who are creative and innovative, but in a very much regulated way, so that we don't experience this kind of disasters.
Meanwhile, Senator Ibikunle Amusun has announced his decision to contest for the presidential ticket. He made the announcement through a letter addressed to the Senate and read by the Senate President Ahmed Lawan during Wednesday's plenary. A senator representing Sokoto South Senatorial District, Ibrahim Dambaba, has also written to the Senate announcing his defection from the opposition PDP to the APC. In the letter, Senator Dambaba explains that he is leaving the party because of the crisis in the Sokoto State's chapter of the PDP.
It is with the greatest respect that I write to notify you and my distinguished colleagues of my intention to contest for the office of President of our dear country, the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and to respectfully invite you and my distinguished colleagues to the formal declaration ceremony. I have been blessed by God to serve as Senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria between 2003 and 2007, and as a two-term governor of Ogun State between 2011 and 2019. I've also had the privilege to be elected a second time to the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria in 2019, where I currently serve the good people of Ogun Central Senatorial District. My varied experience in private and public life has imbued me with the requisite insights, experiences, and network of relationships adequate to provide a leadership that will galvanize our dear country to achieve her manifest destiny as leader in Africa and of the black race.
For the Salah break, the Senate has adjourned till May 10, 2022. Moving on, ahead of the 2023 general elections, lawmakers have returned to their constituencies to seek re-election. Now, the Ninth National Assembly, specifically the House of Representatives, was made up of a large number of first-timers. In my interview with Honorable Bamidele Salam, representing the North, South, Egbedero Ejigbo Federal Constituency of Osun State, we see the Ninth National Assembly through the eyes of a first-timer. Honorable, I know you're very busy with your re-election bid. You're speaking to us from Osun State. And I understand that you're preparing for the primaries, engaging your constituents and hoping that you've done well enough in the first term to deserve a return. But let's quickly get your experience as a first-timer in the House of Representatives. So far, has it turned out to be all you anticipated?
Well, it's actually a mix of the expected and the unexpected. Definitely, as someone who has also been a student of political history, there are a few of the things that happened in the National Assembly that one had anticipated in terms of the general job description of lawmaking, oversight, and representation. But you know, when you come to a place for the very first time, there is no doubt that you have a lot to learn. Because the dynamics, the political intrigues, the back-end politicking, and a few other things that are not very well known to the general public will also be new to a first-timer in the House. The good news, however, is that by the grace of God, one is able to catch up quickly, with the pace of work and make sure that even though one is a first-timer, that doesn't become an impediment to effective representation and effective delivery of services to those who elected us. So it's a mixture of the expected and those things that are not expected that one had to really grapple with within the last almost 3 years now.
So let me ask you this question: as a first-timer, what's been your biggest challenge so far in trying to understand the workings of the National Assembly and the internal politics of the House of Representatives?
Well, now to start with, you know that when we first came into the House in June of 2019, there was a very major issue of election of principal officers of the House. And ours being the minority party in the House, at least the largest of the minority parties in the House, we had issues with being able to agree as a caucus of the People's Democratic Party on the path to toe in terms of electing who will be the Speaker of the House, who will be the Deputy Speaker, and then after that, transiting to those who will be the principal officers of the House. And that challenge was actually a very complex one because as a first-timer, I believe very strongly that I should have an opportunity of, personally x-raying the personalities who are coming out, who were coming out to aspire for the office, because apparently the People's Democratic Party was not going to field the candidates for any of those offices because we didn't have the number. So we still had we had the option of choosing amongst those who are aspiring for the offices within the All Progressive Congress, and that was quite challenging. Because most of us who were elected in the Ninth Assembly were actually first-timers. Majority were first-timers. And so the decision of who becomes what, laid more significantly in our hands as first-timers. And, there are quite a number of people who are coming out to aspire for those offices from the All Progressive Congress. And our own political party did not take a position early enough. By the time the People's Democratic Party took a decision, it became very difficult to be able to aggregate the opinion of members of the People's Democratic Party along the path of what the party was expecting in terms of who should be supported to be the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker of the House. And that to me was by far the most challenging time. And then when we had to elect also the leaders of the caucus, the minority leader, deputy minority leader, and other offices which are to be occupied by the minority leadership, there was also a very major division amongst us as members of the minority party. So what one had to do then was mostly what, by conviction, one believed should be the right path to toe. And thank God we're able to surmount those challenges, even though it took quite a while before were able to get everyone on board and then the party to also see reason with some of us on what the path we took then.
Absolutely. I'd like to know how that affected your time in the House, or how that has affected your time in the House, because we know how that played out. On the one hand, you had the People's Democratic Party pushing for Kingsley Chinda, and then you had Elumelu, who had joined forces with the other minority parties in the House, and then there was a suspension eventually. And then it clearly seemed like there was obviously a minority faction in the House. And Kingsley Chinda, who was not the minority leader, or he's not the minority leader, was eventually named the leader of the PDP caucus. And we know the kind of battles that ensued for quite a long time, as you mentioned. But then as a first-time lawmaker, how did that affect the business of lawmaking or your responsibilities as a lawmaker in the House?
Okay, excellently. You see, how it affected it is this. Usually when you have a parliament, you're supposed to have a body of lawmakers who are in the minority party, who can be called the opposition political parties, if you allow me to use that expression, even though that is more appropriate with the parliamentary system of government. But even then, we are supposed to be a body that provides alternate positions, alternate views, canvas alternate points of argument on major policies of government that comes in. And that can only happen where you have a unanimity of opinion. You don't necessarily have to agree on everything. But the minority caucus itself was divided for too long a time, which did not allow for robust opposition within the flow of the House, even though the minority leader that was elected, Right Honorable Ndudi Elumelu, tried his best to provide a platform for that kind of a robust opposition on the floor of the parliament. But you agree with me that it wasn't as strong as one would have expected because of the kind of division that we had, amongst ourselves. And for those of us who are coming in for the very first time, you then have to also find a balance, between, standing by the party position and trying to also ensure that you do not offend the mainstream of the minority caucus, which we all belong to. But like I said, all that eventually fizzled out with the intervention of well-meaning leaders of the People's Democratic Party, and one was also able to move on. Yes, when you look at the politics of the House of Representatives, it dwells less on political party affiliation because by the rules of the House, and by the oath of office that we all swore to, the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is our guiding law. The oath of office that we have also indicate that we are to abide by the rules of practice in the House and ensure that whatever we discuss, whatever we do, the overall interest of the public is what takes prominence over your party position. But there is no way you can actually take away the fact that having been elected on the platform of a political party with its own agenda and manifesto, there are bound to be sharp differences between us and the government that was in power at the executive level. Unfortunately, much of that could not be done by the reasons that I gave. But like I said, it didn't really, play out for too long before we were able to, find a balance. And you could see the reflection of that, finding the balance when the issue came up on the issue of the Electoral Act, the Petroleum Industry Bill, and a few other bills that came to the House where the minority caucus was able to take a position to reflect where we stand with the Nigerian people, against what the executive was trying to push when those bills and some other bills were being considered.
Welcome back. You're watching The Gavel. We'll return to the conversation of lawmaking and representation from the point of view of a first-time lawmaker, Honorable Bamidele Salam, representing Edo North, South, Egbedero, and the Ejigbo Federal Constituency of Osun State in the House of Representatives. Seeing that you are sort of a neutral person, I'll use that because you're a first-timer, and I wouldn't want you to compare with the 8th Assembly, but were there times when you felt that the executive was compelling the National Assembly to do things that it shouldn't have done? Or were there times where you felt like the National Assembly should have stood its ground and, insisted on certain things or certain demands from the National Assembly, from the executive arm?
Well, actually, I would not want to use the word compel. Politics is an aggregation of interest. Now, wherever you have a party that has a majority in the legislative arm of government, the same party forming the executive, you are bound to have more of collaboration because it's a game of number. Even if, for whatever reason, the minorities have issues with whatever agenda the executive was trying to push in parliament, and you don't have the number to, to go against it, the number to strike it down. You may have your say, but the executive will actually have its way. But I do believe very strongly that the present executive has not explored, so much of that engagement. They have not really deepened the kind of engagement that they should have with the legislative arm in a manner that should have resulted into, the policies or the bills that they are bringing, the policies that they are asking for legislative backup to receive enough support from the parliament. Let me give you an example on the issue of the security. Now, this is one issue that in almost every sitting that we have in the House of Representatives, the issue of insecurity in one part of the country or the other will come up. And for so long, there has been the moves by the parliament to ensure that the executive acts in a more decisive manner, in a manner that shows that the executive understands the urgency and the magnitude of the problem. But what you find in most cases is that the president, with due respect to him and his office, does not appear to understand how urgent and how critical some of these things are.
On a number of occasions in this assembly, I don't even want to mention the last assembly, the National Assembly had invited or summoned certain members of the executive who have failed to honor these invitations or summons, and we haven't really seen anything come out of that. Does that make you question whether the National Assembly has the respect of the executive arm of government as an arm of government?
Sincerely speaking, this government, the present executive, has been the most contemptuous, as far as I know, of the legislative arm of government. There has been a lot of legislative contempt, perpetrated by key members of the executive arm, which is quite unfortunate. There is no doubt that the executive has not shown enough respect. Now, when we talk about respect for the parliament, we're not talking for respect for the person of the speaker or the deputy speaker or even members of the House. We're talking of respect for the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and all laws made by the National Assembly thereto. The Legislative Act, Powers and Privileges Act, which is an act of the Parliament, and all other enabling laws. Even the laws establishing agencies of government. You have a lot of agencies of government violating those laws and not being ready to be accountable to the legislature as required by the provisions of the Nigerian Constitution. Like you rightly said, there has been quite a number of times when summons are issued, invitations are issued to ministers, to heads of agencies and parastatals, and they are breached. They are not adhered to. And for some reasons, which are mostly political, we see that the leadership of the legislature also doesn't want to appear to be confrontational in court. Now, nobody is asking for anyone to, go confrontational, but we have to protect our talk. We have to protect the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Honorable, while we talk about the relationship between the executive and the legislature and the respect that should follow, some also question the synergy between both chambers. I spoke with the leader of the House of Representatives who also re-echoed some of the complaints by members on the floor of the House that there's no synergy between both chambers. Did you also see that?
Well, I have not seen much of lack of synergy. Maybe the leader of the House, as the majority leader, has insight into some of the things. What I just think is a little bit lacking, and which is not a fault of anyone, I think is one of the major defects of our Constitution, is the lack of clarity on some powers of both houses of the National Assembly. Let me give you an instance. There is a belief that the power that has to do with appropriation lies more in the House of Representatives. And there are times when, for example, when the coronavirus was ravaging and we had to consider the 2021 budget, there was an agreement that the both chambers of the National Assembly should hold joint sessions of budget consideration. And our colleagues from the Senate did not appear to appreciate that fact that, yeah, you know, that was a power that ought to be coordinated. And then you had a lot of committees of both chambers of the House, you know, working at cross purposes, and eventually it did not work. And that was why by 2022, there was a decision by the House of Representatives that that kind of collaboration will not happen, and did not happen for the Constitution of 2022 budget. Now, when that happens, you know, it is the country that suffers, because we waste time, we waste resources, we waste energy. We could have synergized in a better way. Again, I think that the volume of bills that come into the floor of both chambers of the National Assembly could also be responsible for this. We have quite a number of bills that come up. You know, most of the establishment bills, for example, come in torrent every legislative year, and then some others. And, you know, the times that we have to synchronize or to harmonize these things are also limited.
I'd like to know from you firsthand how you think you fared in the House as a first-timer. In this regard, it's beyond lawmaking. It's more about your constituency and how you've been able, and how effective you think that your presence in the National Assembly has been to attracting development to your constituency in the form of constituency projects. Now, I'd like to believe that before you joined the House of Representatives, you had somewhat understanding or thought about what constituency project is and how it should go. Did that change, or how were you able to lobby, if you were, constituency projects to your people?
Well, thank you very much. I want to say that the glory of God, my almost 3 years of stewardship in the National Assembly, in the House of Reps, has been very, very impacting on my people in the federal constituency. On the principal job of lawmaking, I don't know of so many first-timers who have been able to have enough. I mean, the number of bills I've had, 13 as of today, and quite not less than 30 motions. But apart from that, in terms of facilitating projects, to the glory of God today, I've facilitated up to 9 classroom projects in different locations of the federal constituency. I have quite a long list of projects on road construction in places where they had never even thought that there would be roads projects in the federal constituency, where I've been able to, in the North local government, in Egbedo local government, where we have facilitated major road construction, some ongoing, some completed. All these 9 classroom projects I spoke about have been completed.
Are these projects that you were able to execute within this your first term?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Within this first term, you know, communities that have not had electricity, 6 different communities, electricity transformers, major renovation projects. There were communities that had been cut off for power for 2 years that were able to restore power to them. Some had electricity infrastructure that they have been using since 1987. The name of the town is called Isoko in the Ijigbo local government. Ijimaba also in the Ijigbo local government. We have electricity project in Ido-Osun in the Egbedo local government. That gives me a lot of joy. And I'm sure that given the opportunity of coming back again, I'll be able to do much more than I've done in the last 3 years.
Honorable Bamidele Salam, I thank you so much for coming to speak with us on the Gavel, and I will allow you go back to trying to get re-elected. Thank you very much for coming to speak with us on the Gavel.
Thank you so much, Terry. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It's a rather busy period for lawmakers, no doubt, ahead of the 2023 general elections, but they will have to find a good balance between lawmaking and seeking re-election. Thanks for watching. I'm Terry Ikubi. Goodbye.